Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Good Takes podcast. Here with Katie, and we're diving into I guess this is the second part of book 5 because we split it up because it's a long one of Return of the King.
Yeah,
So yeah,
officially Pelennor Fields. Can't wait to dive in.
exactly. The big battle, the great battle of our age. You know, you want to be
Yeah.
there. You almost
We were
want to be
saying this
there.
last time, and how Tolkien would be so offended by us wanting to be in a battle after
I
his
don't know. I
preface and
would be
everything.
interested because obviously he doesn't glorify war and he knows more than better than anyone the horrors of it, but there's clearly an element of Tolkien that really enjoys like the old Anglo-Saxon and like Norse myths that are very battle oriented and the whole culture is around. So I wonder if Tolkien wanted to be there, you know.
I don't know. I
There
mean,
was
I do think what you're like to what you're saying is the way that people in battle come together and there's this greater good better than just one person. You're here for an overall objective of good versus evil is something
Yeah,
he's trying to
perhaps
convey. So maybe you're
he'd be
right.
more Faramir about just like loving what it was for them. But I sent you that recording, right, of him reading The Charge of the Rohirrim. Did you listen
You
to that?
did. I listened to a little bit of it, but not the full thing. But I think you said to me, it kind of sounds like Gandalf is reading it. And I
Yeah,
totally got
yeah.
that vibe.
So yeah, I don't know. Maybe we could link it in the description. But there's a website
Yeah.
that has many recordings of Tolkien reading passages, and I saw a bit of the story behind it. I don't know how accurate it is, but I thought it was cool. And so someone can correct me if this is wrong, but essentially this is in the early 50s, I believe, before The Lord of the Rings was published, and I guess Tolkien was having a difficult time finding a publisher, or he was changing publishers or something. And I don't think he was like losing faith, but how the article was describing it was there was difficulty and he had some doubt about the if this book would ever get published or if there would even be an audience. Anyways, he was over at a friend's house who had a tape recorder and they wanted to get Tolkien to record segments of the book to give to publishers, essentially to sell it.
I,
Um, and so his friend was like, choose your favorite passage. And Tolkien, I suppose, chose The Charge of the Rohirrim with Theoden.
of
And
course he
then
did.
his friend was like, you know that this is really, really, really good. And Tolkien's like, after hearing this on the recording, he's like, I believe it again. Because the recordings are crazy. I love his cadence and he enunciates and pronounces things like he's a hero of old.
Oh, you've convinced me to go back and listen to the entire
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, it's
And
worth it. I'll send you the link again.
yeah, and we'll link it in the description because it's definitely worth hearing.
Very
Interesting to see
good.
this is his favorite, well, one of his favorite passages. I mean, it certainly is where everything comes to a head, as you said, the great battle of our time. So it comes to it.
Hmm.
And there's a lot to talk about. I mean, just starting right in, it starts where the battle is already underway because where we left off last time, end of chapter 5 of book 5, is that the Rohirrim had come at last and they were singing as they slew. But there's still a lot to go. While Theoden is still with us, it's pretty quick in this chapter that the bane of him, Snowmane, comes in and
That's right.
really ruins everything for Theoden.
Yeah, and like that is how it happens in the films as well. I mean, the Nazgul rides, the Witch King leaves Gandalf at the front of Minas Tirith and then goes and assaults Theoden. But well, this is after Theoden gets a great victory over one of the Haradrim, I believe. It's like a chieftain or
Mm-hmm.
something.
Yeah.
So he gets his moment, and I think he even mentions that in his little last speech. But even though I was always aware that, because it's the same in the films, how Snowmane essentially crushes him, and it
Mm-hmm.
was more explicit in the books. I was like, oh yeah, like he actually didn't even get like that's so sad. He just got crushed by his horse,
I know. It's like no one could take him down, but his own steed.
which is a
Um,
little, I guess, poetic in some sense.
yeah,
Rohirrim getting killed by their
true. Kind of speaks to a more overall victory too, because no one's really taking down Theoden. He's going on his own terms, and you definitely got the sense throughout the book that Theoden was very aware this was likely to be his last battle,
yeah,
and his end remains epic,
yeah, it
because
does.
it's he goes to see to I can't remember the exact quote, but he does say as
His
he's
fathers.
dying that he goes to his father's, whose great company he will no longer feel ashamed to be in.
Yeah, one of the greatest sayings because like yeah, and I don't know, I didn't get the feeling as much throughout the books as I do in the movies of like Theoden feeling he's like
Not worthy.
defeated. Yeah, you honestly get that more with Eowyn. as a
Yes.
character who really just not despises, but I don't know, is depressed about the nature of Rohan and where it's at in the story.
Yeah.
But yeah, go
Well,
ahead.
and Theoden or Theoden rather, Eowyn, aka Durnhelm, gets her
Mhm.
moment actually before Theoden finally dies. So to kind of
Mhm.
start off where the chapter really begins, um, first of all, the description of the fell beast. I mean, again, I think they do a really good job of showcasing it in the movies, but God, it sounds so terrifying. It was a winged creature, if bird greater than all other birds. It was naked, neither quill nor feather did it
Yeah.
bear. Oh, like you just get this serpentine horrific vision of
And Mary
it.
mentions like how it stank, and when it flaps its wings, like the air was foul or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, it's
Um,
disgusting.
yeah, Tolkien's really good at using smell because he did the same thing with Shelob, where it's just like this thing just stinks.
Yeah.
I didn't need to know that. But it's also an interesting how it's not described as like a common fantasy like drake or dragon or whatever. It's a bird. Like it
Yes.
sounds like it's just like it has like a beak. It seems more horrifying in my mind than just like a slimy lizard, you know?
Hmm. No, I know what you mean. And he talks about how it is essentially evil in and of itself, like a creature
Hmm.
of an older world. Um, and that it was rude, apt to evil. It's just, yeah, you get a whole different visual. It's not just like, oh, this is a big dragon, or like I compared it to a serpent, but he doesn't even really use that language. It is interesting. It certainly makes you just think that it is something that is born of evil, or at
Yeah.
least has been
Twisted thing
distorted.
by Melkor or something.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course the Witch King on top of the fell beast with his great black mace. And I
Hmm.
love that scene in the movies when the mace falls down and Eowyn's eyes just get like she's so shocked.
Yeah.
And it is interesting because obviously, so Theoden's fallen, Snowmane is on top of him, and all of his entourage has either died or they've run off, not necessarily willingly, but because horses were so terrified in the presence of this beast, a lot of them
Hmm.
have run off. But Durnhelm, the young, faithful beyond fear, is still standing there. And who else is standing there but Mary, the
Not so much
courage in this
standing.
hobbit? Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
crawling, he
true.
still stays, which I thought was really, really, she really speaks to the courage that Mary's showing. He's having
Exactly.
his big moment and he's yelling out Kingsman, Kingsman, like he's telling himself as terrified as he is, he has to stay
Like he's got a
with
duty.
Theoden. Yeah.
Yeah, because he probably, I mean, he would have fled if I think, anyways, if not for the love of Theoden. I don't think he
Yeah.
would have stayed for any rider of Rohan. Maybe. I hope so. I mean, he's obviously very courageous. I would have fled.
Same.
Um,
100%
yeah.
same. But no,
It
he
plays out
stays.
almost similar with Durnhelm. First decapitates the fell beast.
After you've
Um,
missed her most epic quote, fool,
oh, does
no
she say that
man can
before?
hinder me. She does, yeah. So
Ah,
he's
okay.
so the Nazgul is standing there and he's essentially Durnhelm, Eowyn, is standing in front of Theoden at this point. And the Witch King says, you cannot stand between the Nazgul and his prey, which is a line in the movies too. And she is essentially says, if you come near him, I will kill you. And he says, fool, no man can hinder me. And um, she says, no living man am I, and reveals herself as
Mhm.
Eowyn. And Mary, who, is not the most observant individual, is shocked and amazed that this is
Yeah, yeah,
Eowyn. Been riding with her for days, but the reveal finally comes.
yeah. I thought he
Yeah,
was
and
the
it's
intelligent
actually,
one.
well, so did I, but there's been a lot going on, so I guess we can cut him some slack. But it's interesting because that's what actually stops him from being so afraid. Because it says very amazement for a moment conquered Mary's fear. He opens his eyes, the blackness was lifted from them, and he sees Eowyn standing in front of Theoden, protecting him from the Witch King. And again, Mary says that, or the description is that pity filled his heart along with great wonder. And suddenly the slow kindled courage of his race awoke.
That's right. Yeah.
Um, and I love that because he's so impressed and blown away. There's nothing, he's not, it's not pity again, as we've said so many times, in the sense of feeling bad for some helpless creature. He is empathizing with Eowyn, seeing her, who was like a father to her, but
Father,
her
essentially.
uncle,
Yeah.
yeah, fallen,
Well, because
and
yeah,
still
and Theoden
standing.
refers to Eowyn as more than daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, you're exactly right, and I love that quote about the slow awakening or slow kindling of his race,
Yeah.
because that's another great little theme where Tolkien obviously very much loves the hobbits, as do we all. But it's very cool how it's just when they're pushed to the brink, they have like a better courage than the mightiest
most.
warrior, let's say. It's very cool. It's super compelling. I don't know. These
Yeah.
little unassuming creatures.
Well, and especially because it's not something most of them would ever have to face in their lifetime. It's just,
Exactly.
life in the
Yeah.
Shire is not going to instill or spark this courage. But if pressed, it's there. Similar to the Ents in a weird way,
Mm,
right? Because the Ents
yeah.
also aren't going to, it's not their nature to immediately, um, use fury and rage and strength. But if they're pushed to it, they will, and they
Yeah.
overcome it in a menacing way.
No, no, I think it's quite cool. And so yeah, that it is a lovely moment. Eowyn obviously has her moment there, and it plays out very similar.
Yeah.
Because I believe Pippin, or sorry, not Pippin, Mary got the first stroke. Is that
On
correct?
the
Or
Witch
just
King. So,
yeah,
well,
he
so
breaks her arm.
that's right. So first, after Eowyn's epic quote, again, it's pretty much exact in the movies. She does note that, or the narrator notes that the Witch King hesitates when he sees that this is a woman,
That's
almost
right.
as though there's
Yes. Yeah,
doubt,
yeah.
but you can't really
Mhm.
tell because he doesn't have a face. But then before he can, actually do anything, or sorry, the fell beast strikes out at Eowyn again, just like it does in the movies, and she uses her sword. Stroke comes down and totally beheads the beast.
Mighty
And
blow.
so, yeah. So it's killed. The head falls like a stone. And then that's when the Witch King comes off the beast. And again, the mace comes out, and the movies did that so wonderfully. And so the mace, he goes to strike Eowyn with the mace. It completely shatters her shield, which it does in the
Mhm.
movies. And that breaks her arm. And then before the Witch King can continue and actually strike Eowyn down,
He's
I love
mid-strike,
this.
right?
He's
He's
like
coming
coming
down with the
for her.
blow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Mary, who has been completely unnoticed by the Witch King this
Yeah,
entire time, which again speaks, they're so
exactly.
underestimated, these poor hobbits, not even
Mhm.
worthy of, realizing that they're there next to you.
Yeah.
But that gives Mary the opportunity to pull out his sword that he got in the Barrow Downs.
Arrow white sword,
And
yeah.
that's, I mean, before you don't even really see there's no line that says, Mary delivered this stroke to the leg. It's just the Witch King is about to come and lay that final blow on Eowyn, and then he stumbles
He
forward,
gets like
and it's
crumpled.
because
Yeah.
Mary's just psh, psh, got him.
Yeah, no, it is really well done because once again, I mean, a prevailing theme, but like you just said, with people overlooking the hobbits, it's like it's so prideful, the evil just in general in Tolkien's world. I mean, I suppose just in general, period. But yeah, it just because I don't think the Witch King ever took note of Mary. Like I
No,
don't
the
think in one
hubris.
once. Yeah.
You would have just. I think there's even a comment, and I don't know if it's here, but at one point that it's he's so unnoticed, he might as well have just been a creature in the grass, or like
Yeah, it's a
not like a
worm,
worm, but
less than
oh,
a worm or something, which is
yeah,
really interesting also because this Nazgul has had running ins with hobbits. Like it went to the Shire. It's like the Witch King stabbed Frodo, which again just shows that like you'd think it would be a little confused. Like here you are. Like
right,
you think there'd be some animus, but no. Like you said, his eyes was sight on his eyes were set on the king.
yeah.
Um, and then Eowyn gets the death blow, the
Yeah,
coup
that's right. So
d'état.
she comes back, she crushes it, and then falls forward. And, she's kind of lying there, fainted, I guess, but it's just the
Mhm.
the effort that it took to, and probably the darkness that would have encompassed her in some way of actually ending this insidious life. She
Yeah, the
falls down
cry
at
that
that
gets
point.
sent up.
Yeah. But, it's really interesting. And I don't know which one I like more. So we can get into it, but it makes me so sad that Theoden dies in the books, not knowing that Eowyn is feet from him, because his last words are delivered to Mary and slightly to
Mhm.
Éomer, who comes over. But but
Yeah.
despite really missing that, because I really love that scene between Eowyn and Theoden in the movies, it's really nice to see Mary and Theoden have that moment in the
I agree.
books.
Yeah, I think, I mean, maybe it's a cop-out answer, but it's true. I think both serve their own particular story. So I think it is
Yeah,
better served in the film because Mary and Theoden don't really have that relationship. I mean, it's not fleshed out at all.
yeah,
And it's great, and it's I believe anyways that Theoden says the same thing to Eowyn as he's
yeah.
dying, as he does when Gandalf brings him out. He's like, Eowyn, I know your face. I think he says that in both times. So it's a nice little circular moment, you know. Eowyn is always there to bring him out of his little darkness. But
In
I
the
agree.
movies,
And
yeah.
in this book, I in the book, I'm glad it was Pippin actually, and I think that they
Mary
or Mary. I don't know why I keep doing that. Too
Potato,
much pipe
potato.
weed. But I think it's really touching, and they speak about herb lore and just all the things that they couldn't do, and it's really really touching.
Oh, when you said the herb lore thing, that reminded me. I think it's a little bit later. Mary's like, I'm never gonna smoke pipe weed again because I
Mhm.
can't smoke it with Theoden. And someone says to him, you should
Aragorn.
actually smoke it. Aragorn is like, you should be smoking in his honor. And Mary's like, all right, in that case, pass me the pipe. But
Yeah.
anyway, we get to that.
No,
But
you're
you're
right.
just saying
But
that
Theoden says
constantly.
something similar, not so much about smoking, but just like in times of peace, just like remember me.
Yeah.
Um, it's really
Yeah.
touching. I think it's very well done. And Theoden was sent out as a king should be. And like you mentioned, his quote, I love that. Just how he goes to his father's, like how he was ashamed, and
Yeah. No,
now he's
I did
done
find
some.
it here. And it's almost
Yeah.
verbatim in the movies. It's that, well, my body is broken. I love saying that whenever I'm like hungover or something, which is obviously such a pale comparison to Theoden, like having his victory on battle and still going to death. But he says, I go to my fathers, and even in their mighty company, I shall not now be ashamed. And
Mhm.
it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And especially given the description of his charge when he's like related to or compared to like a Roma or some Valar. And it's like, yeah, you just that's the highest praise any warrior could get. So
Absolutely.
you've earned it, Theoden.
Yeah.
You've earned your death.
But it is sad. So I mean, yeah, like you said, it makes sense in the books. It's nice that he and Mary have that final moment. I love the movies when he has it with Eowyn, but
Mhm.
it's so sad the line in the books when so he died not realizing Eowyn lay near him.
It is sad. Yeah, I agree.
I just wish
But
they could have had a
he does
moment.
give words like you said, how Éomer does come to the last, and
That's right.
he does say bid farewell to Éowyn. It is
Yes.
sad that he doesn't know. But maybe for the better. Maybe he would be grieved to know
Right.
that she's still in the battle, which is at
Well,
that point like
not
certainly even
over.
lost. Like yeah, like even though the Rohirrim did a great number on the enemy, at that point it's by no means clear that the tide is going to turn in favor to them.
That's right. And the moment when in the books when Éomer finds out that Éowyn is the one lying there. I mean, just before I talk about how it happens in the books, a huge shout out to Carl Urban because his scream and the pain in his face.
Just
Oh my
running
gosh.
over.
When he like it all honestly brings tears to my eyes. He's
Yeah.
so good and he's like grabbing her body in the movies and screaming and he just looks so lost, like the helplessness you would feel.
And that like sad
God,
music
he's
plays,
so
like
good.
the sad like slow chorus or
Yeah.
vocal.
But
No, you're right.
it's really great in the books too. Like
It's a little more
it's
epic in the
crazy
books. Like it's more
because of the
touching in the films.
speeches.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. Because I think a Fey mood overtook him, and that's when you
yeah.
get the death
Death,
scream.
death, death, take us all. I do like the decision in the movies to put that whole speech together because we talked about this already, but that speech Theoden delivers to the Rohirrim is genuinely the most epic speech I have ever or will ever hear. I
Yeah,
honestly
and
believe.
cinematic history. Like
Yeah,
like you want to be. I mean, I know we started with this, but you want to be there. Like
yeah,
I would
screaming
happily
death.
happily scream death with the spear, and then I don't know, not handle my horse at all and get trampled. But the spirit would be there.
Yeah. No, but it's yeah. I mean, it's nice that they tied it all together in the movies, but when it comes back to this moment in the books, and Amir, the Fey mood takes him, and then this rage actually pays off for quite a while. He's
Mm.
slewing enemies and fighting down, but to your point, the battle's nowhere near over, and there is this hopelessness that kind of comes over everyone again. Like, oh my God, there's still so many enemies. How will we ever win?
And then, but and that's also when they see the ships coming, and
And they
Aomer's
lose hope again, right?
and
They're
so
like, oh my
Aomer's
God.
about to make his final stand on a mound or some hill or something.
Yeah.
Um, but as we know, the ships are not all bad, um, and
I
because I think
love that
that's yeah,
sorry, I love that the sales, because I didn't maybe that is a moment in the movies that I just never got. Because I remember in the movies you see the ships coming up and the orcs being like, hurry up, and then Aragorn has that
yeah,
epic like jump over the side.
yeah,
But in the books, it's so cool that he has the Gondor sigil and
yeah.
the
He's got it's
crown
his
on it.
banner. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the banner that the sons of Elrond brought. No, very
Oh,
cool. Because,
that's
but
right.
I think they unfurl it only when they dock, essentially.
Right.
Because the I think it describes that the orcs are cheering,
Yeah.
as all the men are despairing, the enemy is elated.
Yes.
But
And to
sorry, go ahead.
I was trying, and Aemir is prepared to die. Like that's
Yeah,
you're right. They
exactly.
nobody knows until that last moment, so they must just unfurl it in the last.
But Aragorn still gets a very epic entrance in this.
Yeah.
It's a little
Oh
more
yeah.
kingly, but no, the battle as a whole, I mean, it's really well written. Like, because it's comprehensive, and like it doesn't linger. It describes that siege engines are built, and it leaves a lot to the imagination, where it just says there are beasts, like beasts of Mordor. Like, you figure out what it is, like something ungodly. Um, yeah, I don't know. I thought that it's an engaging battle to tell, because with the Game of Thrones books, um, they can get a little long in the tooth, a little morbid, which I don't
Right.
mind. I don't mind gruesomeness, but it's often with George R. R. Martin, and this is not, I do love those books, but everything he does has to be taken to the nth degree. And
Mhm.
Tolkien always just keeps like still a sense of self-respect. I don't know how to
Well, George
explain
Martin
it.
loves to shock and awe, and that
Yeah.
comes through in Game of Thrones. Like, how many times have you seen or read a shocking scene that you're just like, you just did this to shock people.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
Tolkien doesn't even
Yeah.
have to do that. Like, you're still shocked and you're still riveted without it feeling like he's kind of trying to make you feel that way. It just naturally makes you feel that way. Because we
Mhm.
briefly talked about this, not on the podcast, but just kind of together, that Tolkien doesn't describe in the books the specific violence of death. It's a lot of the emotions people were feeling, and Aemir charged and enemies were slew, but it's not, Aemir picked up a spear and it went through the eye of the orc into the brain of the orc behind him.
Blood
Like
spewed
this,
out, and it went on his face, and he gave a death cry, and yeah.
yes. He still conveys the entire scene without having to be overtly violently descriptive.
Yeah, because like again, like I'm not inherently against that, and I think that there's a time and a place,
Yeah.
but it just shows, I think, more of a masterful technique of writing if you can leave that out, because like it goes without saying, a battle is gross. Um, but no, like Helm's Deep. I was really impressed with reading this, how it didn't really drag on, because it's hard to keep. There's so many characters present in Pelennor, between Gandalf and Pippin and Merry and all, and like, name them all. And but you everyone gets their time to shine. But there's
Yeah.
a few differences. So we're done jumping, not jumping ahead a bit, but it happens before this event, and that is with the pirate ships and the dead, because it's the living who win Pelennor. It's only the living, because in the movies this
No,
is
that's
entirely
right.
different.
Yeah, that's right. Because in the movies, the dead still are on the ship. And then that last scene of the battle is the green hue of all the dead going through the entire city and just kind of eradicating everybody. But in the books, to your point, I believe Aragorn actually releases them before they even get to the city because they've done their
Yeah,
job by
yeah,
taking the ships with him.
exactly. Yeah, and I think it's much better in the books. I think that the
Yeah.
movies convey it as though, had the dead not arrived, it would have been lost. And I
Yeah.
think that's a good way of showing how hopeless like the overall cause is. So even though they won, like the march on the Black Gate is still like just as desperate here as it is here. But I don't know, it's cheesy. Like, it's not in a negative way. I love, obviously, it doesn't need to be said that the movies are fantastic, but I prefer this way better.
Well, and I know you said that in the movies it's conveyed that without the dead they wouldn't have won, but that's still the
That's what
case
it
in the
seems like.
books because if they hadn't gotten those
Yeah, true.
ships, they wouldn't have won. But like you said, in the end, it's still men that prevail, proving
Exactly.
Elrond wrong. Men are not weak,
No,
apparently. Although I
not
do love that
all.
quote.
Yeah, yeah, it's very fitting. But no, so I enjoyed it, because I was sitting there when I read that bit about how he does release them once they take the ships. One, it's very interesting. Maybe your interpretation is different, but it doesn't seem like they ever actually kill anyone. The ghosts. I don't know if it gives reference to the horns and the unsheathing of the swords, but the way that it's described is like the enemy flees in terror. They
That's
jump in,
right.
they abandon the ships, they burn them, they jump into the river. So I don't know
I
if
had
the
the
dead
same thought.
actually kill anyone, and or if they just allow, if there's such a panic where the little army with Aragorn is just able to cut them down as they're routed.
That's honestly kind of the sense that I got, that the dead didn't kill anyone, but anyone who didn't flee was just so terrified that they were easy prey for Aragorn
Yeah.
and the Dunedain and everyone that he's with. Um, but no, you're right. They don't kill anyone. And I wish I'd saved the quote. I didn't, but there is something about it seeming like the dead's swords would be like almost transparent or wouldn't take hold, but they do. So this might also
Yeah.
just go back to Tolkien not wanting to harp on like, look, they won, and that's all you really need to know. I'm not going to explain to you how this ghost murdered
Yeah, maybe he
a
just, yeah,
corsair in like
maybe
cold
he
blood.
himself didn't know. No, I'm sure he didn't. I mean, he knew everything, but yeah, it could just be like this is essentially what happened.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, it's like, why did Aragorn choose to let them? Like, I have my own thoughts, but I want to hear yours first. Why do you think he fulfilled their oath there and didn't take them to the city?
I think similarly to how it's shown in the movies, it's because just by helping in this one area, by being ready to go to battle and facing that one battle, they've done their job. Because in the movies, after Minas Tirith, Gimli's like, well, these are helpful guys to have around. You sure you want to release them right now? And Aragorn's like, they've fulfilled their oath. And I think that oath was technically fulfilled when it's the Corsairs, right? That are the
Yeah,
shipmen when
yeah. The
they helped
Corsairs are the
attack
ships
them.
themselves. The Corsairs are a type of
Right.
ship.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So when they take those over, it's like they have fulfilled their oath, and Aragorn's not going to be like, all right, one more, keep going. It's just, understood that was all they needed. What's your take?
No, no, I think that's exactly it. A part of me, like, I was just going through it, like maybe had he taken them just to add on, like, I don't know, these guys have betrayed men before. They worship Sauron. Maybe Aragorn feared that they would fall under the sway of the
Don't
enemy,
tempt them.
especially if the Nazgul came, because I mean, it's very how it's described. I wish I had the quote, but how their fear is described is very much like the shadow. But ultimately, I think that's exactly right. I think that he, as an just as a what an honorable and good king would do is, yeah, you serve, like your oath is fulfilled. I asked you for aid and you've aided me. And because also, I mean, in the movies, it's just Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli and the ghosts. But in the books, Aragorn is bringing a whole other army of the
Yeah.
Southern Gondor man.
Yeah. No, that's right.
But yeah, so I think it's better in the books. Honestly, I think that I like how it's less dependent on the dead. I like how they're a little more ethereal.
Yeah.
There's no characterization. Uh, yeah,
Yeah, it's true. And I love that moment. So once Aragorn and his crew have landed, and you're right, Aragorn's entrance is so kingly. It's like before all, he's coming forward with the flame of the West,
that's right.
Andrew.
Yeah,
But I love the bro meetup between Éomer and Aragorn on the battlefields, and they leaned on their swords and looked on one another and were glad. Like I just
like just
love this
taking a moment.
bromance.
Yeah, and everyone's like, like I didn't know you had foresight. Like, would have been nice to know. Like,
That's so funny when Éomer says that. And like, oh, I guess I should have believed you this whole time that we would
yeah.
meet again. But yeah, I love their relationship so much.
No,
And
I agree.
yeah, and the hope that's kindled is what helps them. I mean, obviously they also have a lot more people in their army. But it's that hope that seeing Aragorn brings in all of the Rohirrim and the Gondorians,
Yeah, I guess.
the
Yeah.
people of Gondor, who are a battle that have been suffering and fighting for so long, but they have this hope renewed, and yeah, they effectively destroy everyone. And there is, I mean, it seems like pretty much everybody dies. There is a
Mhm.
line that few ever came eastward to Morgul or Mordor, and to the land of the Haradrim came only a tale from far off, a rumor of the
Right.
wrath and terror of
Yeah,
Gondor.
which is a great
Epic.
line. Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. So the victory was complete. No, and I think you bring up a good point. I think it's morale. And I think morale is obviously, I mean, I've never seen anything even close to real violence. So, and I hope I never do, but I have no doubt that morale plays a wonderful part in it, where just by seeing the banner and just by seeing like Theoden give his life, where the banner's still there, and um no, I think it makes all the difference. And one thing that I was wondering, just to quickly dwell before we move on, because I think it's related to the ghost thing, and I just wanted to make mention of it, is I was also wondering why Tolkien didn't write Gandalf down into the battle, because like he's almost like a Deus Ex, like a Deus Ex Machina or something, like if Gandalf was in the fight, in theory,
Would have been over.
uncloaked. Yeah, I mean, that's the impression you kind of get. But it seems again
Mhm.
that maybe Tolkien just wanted to be like, but this was a victory of men,
I think so
like,
too. Also, Gandalf had to make a really tough choice, which brings us
mm.
into the second chapter. So we might go back to Pelennor. There's so much to talk about. I'm sure we missed something.
I think, yeah,
But
I think, yeah, if something comes up, I think we covered most of it though.
yeah, and I think that's that is the big dilemma that Gandalf is facing, because Pippin comes running to him and says Denethor is going to burn Faramir alive, and Gandalf has a line that's essentially, you know, if I go and save Faramir, a lot of other people are going to die, and I have to kind of make this choice. And he wants to go to the battle, but he understands that this is kind of where he needs to be. He has to go and see what has happened to Denethor. The madness of Denethor has taken over.
Exactly, because Gandalf at that point suspects that Sauron has somehow manipulated his will into the city, because they're not aware of the planter yet.
That's right. But you're right. The big moment does come. But before they get there, and before even when it comes to the chapter after Battle of Pelennor Fields, one of the best lines, well, I say that about everything, but there's a moment where it goes back to Pippin. So the battle's still going on, because we've kind of gone back in time a little bit to here's where Pippin and Gandalf were during this battle in the fields. And Pippin rose to his feet. So he's hearing the horns of the Rohirrim. As if a great weight had been lifted from him, and stood listening to the horns, and it seemed to him that they would break his heart with joy, and never in after years could he hear a horn blown in the distance without tears starting in his eyes. Like, same Pippin, even though I wasn't even there.
No, very true. It is quite beautiful. Because I mean, when last we saw Pippin, he was struck with fear by the Witch King, and at that point, everything was hopeless. They didn't even think Rohan was going to come at that point. So that's it's quite a turn. I don't blame him. I still think Gandalf would have won that fight, but I guess we'll never know.
Well, like you said, it was a fight for men, and the fact that they're still able to be victorious, and also Aragorn kind of needed that W, so that when he comes into Minas Tirith and is like, "This is mine now," everyone's like, "Okay, you know what? You saved us. Sure, you can have it." But how he enters the city is really interesting, which we'll get into in a couple chapters. But yeah, so I mean, where we're at is Gandalf has effectively decided, instead of going down to help with the battle as he so desperately wants to, he's going to go and save Faramir. And wow, I found the whole Faramir burning, I mean, it was really intense, and obviously Denethor decaying or devolving into this madness was crazy, but we kind of lost an epic Pippin moment, because Pippin is so, in the movies, Pippin like literally saves Faramir's life, but in the books it's a lot more Gandalf, you know, and of course Baragond, who is an absolute stud, the guardsman of the city, or one of them.
Yeah, and he does something that I will see later in the book, but something that needs judgment, because he killed a few people.
The key holder, like very, very intense. But I mean, he does say that this,
he drew his sword first.
Yes, he drew, and he loves Faramir. I mean, we talked about this in the last podcast, that so many of the guards and the people of Gondor love Faramir and have so much love for him. And so to know that his life is at stake, I feel like people like Baragond were willing to do anything, and they were just getting rid of
it was
his
love for his captain. And I mean, that's why Gandalf doesn't chastise him. But yeah, so okay, so Merry and Pippin, or my lord, my names are all screwed up. Pippin and Gandalf get to the Road of the Dead or something like this. Anyways, the House of the Dead, the House of the Stewards. And there they find Denethor, and I love that final exchange between Gandalf and Denethor. It's very intense, like all their interactions are.
Yeah, well, and even before any communication, Gandalf just lifts up his hand, and Denethor's sword flies out of his grasp, and there's a note that Denethor looks at Gandalf amazed. And you know, the Battle of Wills that's been going on for so long was child's play to Gandalf. All right, one lift of his hand and you're powerless. So I did kind of like that moment, but yeah, it's really epic. It's a good culmination of everything that they've been kind of going back and forth on, with Gandalf obviously triumphing. But and that is actually also when Denethor, I mean, he reveals a couple of things, but he reveals in this exchange that he does in fact know about Aragorn. We were saying before that in the movies, that's one of the first things Denethor says. He says, with one hand, you would come and act like you're helping me, and the other, you would supplant me. But he does reveal that. He's like, I know that you've kind of been bringing this king with you. You think
Ranger.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty epic. But so Denethor knows a lot more than he's letting on, even with all the knowledge he's already shared. And we come to realize it's because he truly does have a Palantir. God, the moment when he like lifts it up and is showcasing it, I guess I knew that was triggering something, and obviously you recalled that. But they do make mention of, because you had said in the last time we chatted, that the light happening in the tower was happening pretty frequently, and that was clearly Denethor actually using the Palantir, right?
Yeah, exactly. Um, and yeah, I think it's quite interesting how it was used against Denethor, because I think I don't know if it's just the narration or Gandalf himself, I don't recall, but essentially it just says, it must be Gandalf, about how Sauron, the Palantir can't, even Sauron couldn't make the Palantir show you something that wasn't real.
Right.
So, which I think also just makes, like, we'll get there to the last debate, but it makes his madness make sense. Where it's
Yeah.
just like he was shown things that in a certain way are true. Like there was no victory against Mordor. It's too powerful. Whatever Sauron threw here is just a fraction of his strength.
Yeah.
And I think that, it's a shame because Denethor obviously is a very wise character, very cunning, which you get more of a sense in the books. But it still wasn't enough to kind of not contest with the will of Sauron, but to despair, essentially. And despair is another huge theme that runs throughout these books. Um, and I know that when he decides, I love the exchange, it's only semi-related to this, between Gandalf and Denethor, when Denethor is insisting that he's going to take his own life. And Gandalf says, like, authority is not given to you, steward of Gondor, to order the hour of your death, which I
Yeah.
think is it's just super cool. I mean, in the movies, it's to deny the return of the king, which is you need the name drop.
Steward.
Yeah. But I just thought it was, again, just the idea of like despair. He's like, you're the steward of Gondor, but even you, it's just like you don't have the right to give up until it's over.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show that, again, Sauron's greatest weapon is turning men against men, which
Yeah.
Gandalf and mentions how that's very pitiable just outside of the House of the Stewards.
Right. Well, because it has created this civil kind of war almost between these
Yeah, man,
individuals
they're just
who,
these are brothers. They should be fighting the enemy, and now there's a few. I don't know the number, but a few men, Tower of Guard men, who are just killed and slain, um, over nothing.
exactly, well, the fear of Sauron has sunken in. And I think also what you miss in the movies a little bit is what you were saying earlier, that Denethor is this like pretty epic character. He's obviously incredibly intelligent, incredibly wise. He genuinely loves and wants to do what is right for his people. And yet still the evil overtakes him through this despair and fear. And I think it goes to show that Merry and Pippin and some of these smaller characters that maybe don't have such a great weight on their shoulders still don't succumb to that despair fully. And it doesn't matter how strong of an individual you are in many different ways, despair can come and overtake you. And it's sadder in the books. You feel for
Mhm.
Denethor, like you said.
Yeah,
I mean,
agreed.
what he's seen in the Palantir is that there is no victory. And so why can't he and his son just choose the manner of their own death and get out of here? And jumping ahead again, but there is a moment later when all feels lost once again, where Pippin actually says, I wish Merry was with me. And I get where Denethor was coming from, because if we're
Yeah,
going to die, why not just die together? So,
exactly.
he wasn't totally out of line.
No, it makes him more
I
powerful
mean,
because he's right.
yeah,
Like in a real sense, he's right.
yes,
But that's
which
the
is
trick.
sad.
Yeah, and I think I think you brought up a good point there. Um, and I think it's related to it. It's interesting how it's the characters with the most power and like the most cunning. Because with the hobbits, like you said, you don't see this, and even though they're so meek and meager and mild and timid, they don't have that. Like obviously they get sad and they do, especially inside of the Nazgul. But it's these great characters who, they rise to the heights, but they also have the greatest falls. I think there's a really cool comparison between Denethor and Theoden, because both at one point in the stories have their mind essentially broken, but it's almost reversed. So Theoden accepts
Ooh,
Gandalf, accepts his counsel, and he rises out and he dies. Both of them die, but Theoden gets a glorious death as a king. His people love him, and he didn't despair. He faced against the Witch King. And then Denethor, who more reclusive and less open to outside counsel and outside, especially from Gandalf, um, his mind ends up breaking, and then he dies in a way that is not befitting of a Lord of Gondor. Um,
absolutely. That's
yeah,
really
so I just thought it was a
interesting.
really cool comparison between the two like leaders of men,
Totally.
and essentially how trusting Gandalf or not, I think there's deeper levels of that, but Gandalf was the symbol of it, um, is more or less their downfall or their uprising.
Well, and Gandalf kind of representing the hope there, like being open to the hope
Yeah,
and to the, and this kind of goes
totally.
to faith, because we've talked about the religious aspects thread throughout the books. And Tolkien obviously being quite religious himself, but there is something deeply faithful in all of this. Like, have faith,
100%.
and maybe you're going to come to a doom regardless, but the manner of your end is going to be irrevocably changed by your ability to have faith and hope and still fight for
Exactly.
what is good.
And you see that in the deaths, because with Denethor, before he dies, his men are killing each other. But with Theoden, you have Merry and Eowyn's and Eomer, like by love, they go against the darkest evil on the battlefield. And so I think that's exactly right. Um, and you kind of see it. One thing I was wondering, it's related in a sense, perhaps to the greater mythology of Middle Earth, but just because we touched on the ships, they mentioned about how the winds change, and
Yes.
the Tolkien people who are very well versed in Tolkien will know this far better than I do. But I do wonder if that was the Valar, because like if they're aiding, because there's a
Ooh.
wind, like a change and from the sea, and there's like, again, like someone will correct me, but Manwë, I believe, and we'll see this with the eagles who controls like it's not in your face, but it is this idea that just hold on to the last, and like Tolkien coined this word. It's called eucatastrophe, and it's the opposite of catastrophe in a narrative. And eucatastrophe is I think he described it as clutching victory from the jaws of defeat. And so
That's
you see that with
beautiful.
these characters. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And anyway, so that's just what you said there about hope and faith. And it just reminded me of a thought that I had, sorry, about maybe someone can inform me, because I don't actually know, but that thought crossed my mind if the Valor are also helping out on this.
That's so, I know we should really do outside research, because candidly, we are literally just reading the books and watching the movies and then drawing conclusions. Like, I'm sure we've both seen other things, but I don't deep dive into other people's perspectives. Like, I'm sure people have really interesting essays and takes and lectures on this. Not
Mhm.
something I'm really privy to, but I think that's so interesting. And it goes back to one of my favorite Gandalf quotes when I use the movie reference, because it's just the one ingrained in me. When he's in the Mines of Moria with Frodo, and Frodo says, "I wish the ring had never come to me, and wish none of this had ever happened." Gandalf has an epic quote, but one line of that is, "There are other forces at work here than that of evil," and
Exactly.
that's a good moment to that. There are certainly other forces at work, and evil's not always going to triumph. And eucatastrophe is very. I actually didn't know that. That's a really
Ah,
interesting
yeah, yeah,
phrase.
yeah. It's a cool term. Yeah, and I think I mean, Tolkien. I mean, that's in The Hobbit as well with the eagles. It's in the Lord of the Rings as we'll get there, or with Gollum and the ring, of course.
Yeah.
Um, once more spoilers. But yeah, no, I think it's a really cool theme that I'm sure if you looked for it is in many narratives. But Tolkien, I mean, again, I can be corrected, but I'm very certain that he coined that term.
I believe
Though I
it.
don't know where. It's been quite a while since I was made
No,
aware of
it's
that.
interesting. Well, it's going to come up a few more times, and we'll talk about the Eagles too, because I know, and
Mhm.
I've gotten in many debate of why didn't the Eagles just take the ring, and we'll
No,
get
there's
there
there's
because
very
we're not
clear
there
answers
yet.
as to why. So
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
there are.
we can attack
We'll
that.
get there, but to stay on our track here, we'll back up a little bit and go to Denethor's death. But I think everything you've said and the comparison between him and Theoden is really compelling. Definitely, totally accurate. And the painful, like you can just imagine that the pain that Denethor was going through, that final yell they hear when he,
Yeah.
realizing he can't take Faramir with him, just leaps onto the pyre himself and burns with the Palantir. And my God, the visual of the Palantir after he
Mm.
dies, what is it? And you can't look into it without seeing two withered hands.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
Crazy.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and like you said, like the screech that's described, it's like everyone standing outside in silence for a bit, and then it's just final death knell. A horrible way to go. Horrible, horrible.
Oof.
It would not be that
And
quick, I don't think.
oh, burning. Anyway, I don't want to get that's so morbid, but no, it would be horrible.
That's where Tolkien
Um,
chose to dwell, on a man burning to
right?
death.
No, too much. But I mean, you don't get a ton of it. There's just the pitiable
No.
scream. The door, Gandalf closes the door and kind of horror that he's actually done it. I was a little remiss though. I miss the moment in the movies because it's so epic. The run across and then the jump off the city, and you can see the flame going down for so long in that shot.
It is
Um,
epic, but
I
it
guess
makes
they
no
didn't want to
sense.
make it. Exactly. It wasn't supposed to be an epic end.
No.
But still, I like that moment in the movies.
Yeah, me too. But it's just like it's not how I picture it in the books, but in the films, and where the where the tombs are. It's very far from like
Yes,
where
the
Denethor. So
plinth or
he's
whatever.
running like a half a marathon on fire. So it's impressive. Maybe he does have more strength in the films than we thought.
Okay, you're right. The logic isn't quite there, but they do imply in
No,
the
but it's
movies
worth
that
it.
where
It's
he
worth it.
is close
Yeah, the
enough.
rule
But
of cool, as they call it, I believe.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But still, the visual of the hands withering in flame in the Palantir is an equally cool and morbid visual.
Mhm.
So really interesting how that is the end of Denethor. But he doesn't even have the opportunity to have. I mean, yes, Faramir is lying there; he's covered in these oils. But in the movies, the fire is literally taking place, and Pippin jumps up and pushes
Mhm.
Faramir off, and so we kind of lost that Pippin moment. But he does have many epic moments throughout the books.
No,
So
that's true. But you do, Gandalf does recognize it. I think it's actually when he's speaking to Mary, but it's to the same effect where he's basically saying, like, thankful that Elrond didn't push
yes,
back on encouraging the hobbits to come, because if they didn't, the Witch King would not have fallen and Faramir would have died
would have
too.
died.
So
Yeah.
they each
Well, and would they have even? I mean, the Palantir Gandalf might have looked into it because Pippin prevents that.
exactly.
You're
There'd be
right.
no
Gandalf
Gandalf
does
the
have that.
White.
Oh, true. Oh my gosh. Anyway, it always bothered me when people would come back to me with everything Pippin does is for a reason, but it totally is. So I will
You are
seize
right
that
though. In the
one.
books, I mean, we mentioned this before, but it just in the books, it's a little more up in the air as to whether how much that the Pippin stone throw did compared to the
In the
movies.
Minds of Moria, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, he is obviously a necessary character. And you're right, Gandalf does have that moment of, thank goodness
Mhm.
that these two hobbits came along. And it speaks to the value of the fellowship. They are all their best parts when they are a whole in this,
Exactly.
not always together in body, but together in spirit.
Exactly. Exactly right.
And then I don't know if there's much more to say about the Pyre of Denethor. The next note I had is the battle is over and the Merry and
Yeah.
Pippin reunion. Although I loved the moment in the movies when Pippin is rushing through the battlefield, like the end of it.
Ready.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he finds them. Oh my God. And so it's so different in the books where Mary is with the group that's coming back into the city and he's wandering kind of dead on his feet and takes a wrong turn and is all by himself and Pippin ends up finding him there. But I like the epic moment of Pippin finding Mary on the battlefield a little
I
more.
agree. No, I agree. It's more touching. And it's like, no, Mary, I'm going to look after you. And he's like, are you going to leave me?
Yes.
It's
Oh,
it's much more touching. Because like you said, Mary's just kind of in a stupor in the city and Pippin just happens across him.
yeah. But it is
Um,
horrifying to me that Mary says, "Are you going to bury me?" In
no, I think
the
he's gonna, I
books.
think, oh, that's right, in the books. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
No, because you're right. The movie moment, "Are you going to leave me?" And Pippin says, "No, Mary, I'm
No,
going
but
to take care of you."
yeah,
But
I'd forgotten that.
it's
Yeah,
and Pippin's response is no, indeed. But says Pippin, trying to sound cheerful, though his heart was wrung with fear and pity. No, we're going to the houses of healing, and you don't
mhm.
really get any houses of healing in the movies except one or two shots
Yeah,
that we
the
can talk
extended
about and
scenes of
extended. Yeah.
Aragorn like washing Eowyn,
Well, that's so
essentially.
funny because I, again, watching the movies was like, God, Aragorn, give this woman a break. Like now you are washing her, you're
Saved her life.
cleansing the war off of her. What are you doing? But to read the books, the hands of the king are healing. And, he's actually
Mhm.
doing this to everyone. And anyway, it was funny because that clicked for me, whereas I'd forgotten that about the hands of the king. And really just thought that again, Aragorn was like, oh, there's my girl. Let me just go in and give her a quick bath. But it
Yeah,
very
yeah,
much has a purpose
exactly.
in the books.
Yeah, you're looking a little grim, Eowyn. Let's clean you up. No, it's it could be his Aragorn's it's very cool how all three of them, who is it? It's Merry, Eowyn,
And
and
Faramir.
Faramir. Yeah,
Mhm.
and but they all are sick. I think Faramir to a lesser degree, but they're all sick with like the Black Shadow or something.
Yes.
It's not the wounds that they're suffering from, but it's direct contact with the darkness.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting the image that's created as Tolkien's describing like the healing effect, how Aragorn like shuts his eyes and he calls to them, and like they're in a different world. I don't know, I
Yes.
forget exactly how it's described, but they're far
Well,
off.
when Aragorn is speaking, it's his voice is getting lower and lower to those around them because it's almost like he's going into the shadow to pull them out. It is
Mhm.
really interesting.
And like
Um,
he's and like again, like I don't want to harp on it, but I think it's just it is there. And like that idea how, because we see this with Faramir come out and when he wakes up, he's like, my king. And it's just like Aragorn has healing hands, and like the king has, I don't, they're like, there's some very religious connotations here. It doesn't matter one way or the other, anyone's perspective on it, but in the story itself, it's quite cool how just by nature, I mean, I guess it can't just be the Numenorian blood, because many people have it, but Aragorn, like you said with the rhyme that I forget her name now, Yorith or something.
Yreth, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, she says that little rhyme about the hands of the king, how Aragorn has just by nature of him being the king, the
Yeah.
rightful king, he has this ability to pull these men out and heal
What
them.
she says is the hands of the king are the hands of a healer, and so shall the rightful king be known. And so it just furthers the proof that, we already all knew this, but Aragorn is the rightful king. And it's a really interesting way to show that without any debate. Like, there's no question here. He is
Exactly.
absolutely the king, whether
Especially
or not
by nature of him coming, because you wanted to mention how like Aragorn's entrance into the city, because before, when Pelennor ends, Aragorn does not want to declare himself, and he doesn't even want to enter the city until the shadow is totally defeated. So,
That's
but
right.
when Gandalf encourages him to come in, he comes in as Strider, which we love to see him as Strider, and people don't recognize him because he's cloaked.
Right. And he does say that Strider will be the name of his house.
Yeah,
And in the high
Telcontar
tongue,
or
it's
something.
Telcontar, exactly. But no, you're right, because he doesn't want to
Very
come in
cool.
as king until he's fully, saved the people from, Mordor and the evil. And that's so he actually cedes the leadership for the moment to Prince Emerhill, who's not a character who's in the movies, and you totally get why. He's not a super essential character, but just another
He
example
seems
of
cool for what he is. He's not overly
yeah,
fleshed out. The symbol of the swan seems neat, but
yeah.
yeah, and
We
I love the little moment when Aragorn is there and Éomer, he's speaking with the hobbits, and I think it's Merry. He basically says like, "Oh, you can go get me your pack of smokes," essentially.
Yes.
And but Éomer is just like, "Is this how these people talk to you? Like, like this is how they speak to their king?" And then Strider's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." Like,
Yeah, he's like, yeah, I'm
go
used to
away
it, but
now.
I'm not getting you your pack. I got some other things to do.
Yeah, no,
But it
and
turned
then
out
Mary's
Mary
like,
had
"I'm
his pack the whole
sorry." He's like,
time.
"No," he's like, "I know that's what I'm tolerating you. Like, I would not anyone else because I know he's like, long live the Shire folk or something like that." I always
Yeah,
love those little interactions of how Aragorn is now like at the height of his um grandeur, I suppose, but Strider is always there, and I think that's really what makes him a just little character. Super
totally. And the
interesting.
hobbits are always going to see him as Strider because
Yeah,
that's just how they were
exactly. It's
introduced to
very
him.
touching.
That did remind me, though, just by bringing up the hobbits, one moment that happens in the movies when this battle is all going on that doesn't happen in the books is after, I believe it's after Gandalf and Pippin save Faramir and Denethor dies. Gandalf and Pippin find themselves in like a final hold within the city.
Mm.
And so they're behind doors that are about to be crushed down. And again, how many times have I said it? But one of the most beautiful moments in the whole movies when Pippin says, I didn't think it would end this way. And the quote that Gandalf says is kind of pulled from elements that are written out in the Barrow-Downs chapter of the Fellowship.
That's right. Is it
But
Frodo dreams in Tom Bombadil's house, I think.
yes, but to hear Ian McKellen say it end, no, the journey doesn't end
And his
here.
little eyes like
Oh,
sparkling.
I
I don't
know.
know how
How
that
does he do that? But I wrote the whole quote down because it's just so beautiful. Death is just another
relate.
path, one that we all must take. The gray rain curtain of this world rolls back, and all turns to silver glass. And then you see it. Then
What,
Pippin,
Gandalf?
what, Gandalf?
What?
White shores and beyond, far green country under a swift sunrise. I mean, and
That
then
isn't
that
so
doesn't
bad.
sound so bad. No.
No, it isn't. Yeah, I know it's a fantastic moment. And I actually wish that was in the books.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
because it's comforting. I mean, who knows what if there's anything after when we all go to that fateful end, but I hope it's that because it does sound quite nice, eh?
I will
Um,
take that.
and
And I
and
believe
and
Gandalf.
yeah, me too. And it's also very encouraging for Pippin to hear that because he's seen Gandalf die and come back. He's like, all right, if anyone's gonna know, I don't need to
It's
take you
this
on
guy.
faith. This is lived experience.
No, that's so
Gandalf's just
true.
lying. It's actually horrible. He's like,
Oh
ah,
my God,
you're not
stop.
ready, Pippin. It's
No,
white
there's no
shores.
lie in that eye, okay? Those twinkling eyes speak only the truth.
No,
And I just
agreed.
love the character of Gandalf. He's so trusting. I would follow Gandalf to any end. I truly would.
Agreed. I think that like in all of literature, I think that he's a top five, probably number one for me. I don't know what it is. I think it's just the kindly old man. Like you see that it's a trope, but I don't know, Gandalf. I like it goes to what we said at the beginning. I think Tolkien himself has admitted this himself, but I could be wrong. How he put a lot of his own, I
Essence.
don't know, yeah, into Gandalf. I don't think he would lay claim to the wisdom, though no doubt he had it because he wrote the character, but more of just like quick to laugh, quick to anger, you know. He wants to take counsel with the wisest person in the room, so he's going off to think to it by himself, like that kind of,
Yeah.
um, you know. But yeah, I love Gandalf.
Yeah. And it even though it is a trope, I don't know how I feel like a lot of the more recent ones have been influenced by this initial archetype that Tolkien created.
Yeah, I
And there
see
is
that.
something, it's not even, it's just the comfort in someone so wise. You know, a very sad truth as just any individual growing up is when you're a kid, you think that adults or other people in your life have all of the answers. And as you get older and start to realize that no one has a fucking clue, it's
Mhm.
horrifying. And so to know that there could be a character like Gandalf that you can wholly trust and that does see so much more than you or anyone ever could is truly, truly comforting and non-existent in our world from my perspective, but a comfort that I desperately seek. So I believe anything Gandalf says.
Yeah, well, he's out there. He's out there somewhere, no doubt.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because a few times it happens first, I believe, at the Pyre of Denethor, and then again in the Healing Houses. He has this ability to see events. Like he looks out, for instance, when they hear the Nazgul cry in defeat. It's after this happens during, I think Denethor is burning, and they go to the walls with Pippin, and Gandalf looks out, and then he sees he makes mention of how, like, he sees the events unfold. Like Theoden's dead at this point, but he gets a glimpse of it, and it's mentioned again in that. And I thought that was cool because it's not something that you ever really see out of Gandalf until this moment. But he
That's right.
seems to
And it's
have this like
beyond
prophetic vision.
right. It's not just, you know, Legolas and his keen elf eyes. It's
No,
actually
no.
the ability to focus on a moment and be like, oh, this is kind of how things are unfolding.
Yeah, like replay it in your mind how
Mm-hmm.
it went down. I don't know. I just thought that was cool and something I didn't pick up until it was mentioned in these later chapters.
No, that is true. There's so much more to Gandalf. And I feel like we could spend so much time just talking about that. And a lot of it probably further fleshed out in the appendices and Silmarillion that I'm not quite recalling, but he's a really complex character. And yeah, he has a lot of cool moments. And that is really interesting because it's not a trait of his that you see much of, but he does have that moment where he understands that like what has happened on the battlefield.
Mm.
And then, I mean, that's pretty, so the battle is done, the houses of healing, everyone is, you know, pulled away from the black shadow, thanks to Elisar.
Mhm.
Um, and then, you know, I don't know, after that, it's kind of this, everyone has this temporary reprieve of just a little bit of recovery after this battle, knowing that the worst is yet to come. It was interesting because I had forgotten about this, but in Lothlorien, or after Lothlorien, in the White Rider chapter of Two Towers, when Gandalf comes back to them, he has messages for Aragorn and for Legolas from Galadriel. And
Mhm.
I don't know the exact quote, but the message to Legolas is kind of fear the crying of the gulls.
That's
And he's like,
right.
God, this is so ominous. And he says after this battle that, like, alas for the wailing gulls. Did not the lady tell me to beware of them? Now I cannot forget them. And his heart is being drawn to the sea, and he
Yeah,
feels
he
this
says that he'll never
call.
find peace under the trees, essentially.
Yeah, he
Um,
needs to be, and he's like being called to the Grey Havens, essentially being
mhm.
called home as an elf. I thought that was really interesting. And then
No, I
Gimli being
agree.
like, "We need people like you. Don't leave us." Oh, that
Yeah,
just
yeah,
makes me
yeah. He's
so
like, no.
sad.
I love that little moment because it goes back to what you're saying about just the strength of the fellowship. And we've mentioned this before, but um, obviously in the books you get way more development between the characters, and it's some of my favorite parts. So when the hobbits are sitting on the wall with Legolas and Gimli, um, it's a wonderful exchange, and that's where he mentions it, and Gimli has to reluctantly tell the tale of the paths of the dead. Um, but
Actually, Gimli won't tell it, and then Legolas is like, "I don't fear the dead. I'll
That's
tell
right.
you what
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
happened."
Legolas the show off. And it's cool how they both say it's like, once Aragorn comes into his own, Gimli wants to bring dwarves from the Lonely Mountain to craft the stones, and Legolas wants to bring birds and trees that will live forever, essentially. And then Gimli goes on just about how, like, I think it's just a wonderful quote. I won't read all of it, but just about how even though men make great works, everything has like a frost in their works, like everything will come to pass. He's like, and then Legolas is like, yeah, but like the deeds of men will outlast us. Just which is true because I mean in Tolkien's, I don't know if we brought it up in this, but the prevailing idea in Tolkien's mythos is that it's Earth, it's prehistory to Earth, and we're
Yes.
in like the seventh age, we're in some later age.
Yeah.
And so if following that logic, it's true. I mean, a lot of folklore has elves and dwarves in them, but they're just shades now. And
Yeah.
I don't
And
know.
there's
I
a
just thought that
long
was a
standing
touching
of
moment
men.
because
No, it
again, like
is.
that's a huge narrative theme of the whole entirety of the Lord of the Rings is like these are latter days in every respect.
Yeah, and the glory of them have been forgotten in so many different ways. But
Mm.
yeah, the testament of men is that we're still here.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Men are not weak.
Yeah, well, Elrond would disagree with you.
Yeah, he would. But he sends his
Um,
sons, which is quite cool. I don't know why they took them out of the movies. Because then you get the elven representation in the battles aside from Legolas. I guess I don't know.
true.
Not to
Well,
someone who
there's
watched the movie.
Haldir and Two Towers, and
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
so I mean, the nice the moment when the elves come to Helm's Deep is really beautiful in the movies. And I think to that point, even though El, I don't remember their names,
Aladan and
Elrohir,
Elrohir. Yeah.
Elladan, I always forget him, Elladan and Elrohir. Even though that's only two of them, I don't recall if they bring any others. I think it is just the two of them. It goes back to what you were saying before. This is a battle that men have to win, and so maybe just having that focal point outside of the Fellowship on men is kind of a critical element.
No,
But I
agreed.
mean, that's pretty much it. That, like you said, that moment is really nice to see the Fellowship back together, and all of
Such
them
as they are.
talking. Yeah, just kind of having a reprieve moment between these horrible battles. But I think that brings us into the last debate, right?
Mhm.
Just trying to recall if there's anything else that I kind of wanted to chat about, but that last chapter where they do need to decide, what do we do? Do we let the evil that we know is crawling out of Mordor come to us? Do we go and face it, even though it's absolutely hopeless? And Gandalf, having this intel from Faramir that Sam and Frodo have taken the Cirith Ungol direction into Mordor, he does say that Denethor has been counseling caution, and others have that this might be a conservative approach to take, but
It's like
I
prudence.
still
I
hope for
think he says it's
victory.
like the counsel of prudence would be to like just
Yes.
go back to your homes and fortify. And then
Yeah,
everyone's like,
and just
yeah, but
wait.
he's like, but I'm not counseling prudence.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And he says, I said victory could not be achieved by arms. I still hope for victory, but not by arms. For into the midst of all these policies comes the ring of power, the foundation of Barad-dûr, and the hope of Sauron. And so
Yeah,
that is where he kind of encourages everyone to place all of their hopes on the fact that Frodo might, by some small, minute chance, get through and destroy the ring. And if he doesn't, we're all going to die anyway. So we might as well throw all of our force and all of our weight at the gates of Mordor in the hope that by us doing this, we can distract the enemy, make him think that we have the ring. And that's why we're so crazy to come to you with this small shell of an army. And maybe that will give Frodo the chance he needs. Unlikely, but maybe. So, my
exactly.
God,
Yeah,
you
they're
really have to be
banking once
hopeful.
more on Sauron's hubris. And I think it's just I love that little exchange of the last debate. I wish Gimli was there on. It's so funny in the movies. I was just on Denethor's
On the
just seat, just
throne.
smoking his pipe. Yeah, yeah. But Gandalf also just as he does, some great little pieces of dialogue in there. He has I don't know the specific line, but he speaks about how ultimately it's like up to them to root out, like they could go and wait it out, but like they need to root out evil where they see it, just for those who come after, because he gives mention, not like overly forthrightly, but like this is the first time I believe in the text, maybe it comes at in Shadow of the Past or whatever, at the start of Fellowship, but Gandalf says that Sauron is a servant, and there are more, and
Yes.
like whatever happens here is like there are actually going to be more evil days coming. So we
Yeah.
have to root out what we can here. And in Tolkien's mythos, it's like it's very similar to what is in Norse mythology, I can't believe Ragnarok, Dagor, something like that. Basically, Morgoth will return.
Yeah.
Well, when we get to the Silmarillion, I think hopefully we do that. We can
Oh,
talk
for
more
sure.
about this. But Gandalf gives like a very subtle hint of this idea that's just like we think that this is so bad, and it is, but it's just like time is going to
One
march
evil
on.
and many
Evil will
good.
always be there. It's our duty to sacrifice ourselves for better days, which is obviously a great message to us all.
Yeah, well, it goes back to that kind of greater good thing, which is hit on the head in the Harry Potter universe, which, debatable as to, I love Harry Potter, but I think that the subtlety of it here, of this, like, without saying greater good, that's very much what it is.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
we're parts of a whole, not all individual wholes. And that's
Exactly.
exactly what he's saying. And so that he does say that other evils may come. Sauron is but a servant himself. Yet it is not our part to master all the tides of the world, but to do what is in us for the succor of those years wherein we are set, uprooting the evil in the fields that we know, so that those who live after may have clean earth to till.
Yeah,
And
perfect. All
it's
right. I'm glad you got the quotes up because
I
that's
have
exactly what I
quoted
was referencing.
literally half of this, more than half the book is quoted at this point. I've got like 10 pages of
Well
Goodreads
worth it
quotes
though.
because absolutely, it's so hard to determine what to quote and what not to. But I thought what he said is really powerful, and a larger message, whether it's this moment in time or for really many circumstances and arguably our own lives too.
Yeah,
Yes, that
no,
greater good theme.
absolutely. Yeah, and so I was wondering because when he mentions that thing just briefly about Sauron, again, because it's so hard to remove myself, I wonder what a first-time reader would think Sauron is. Like he's clearly not a man. He's
Yeah,
lasted thousands of years, like, in both physical and immaterial forms. It's kind of implied that he has a physical form in the books. He doesn't
yeah,
in the movies, not really. You get a glimpse of him in the eye, kind of, but in the Palantir. But it's also not expressly said, So I after what like we know what he is just by having years of just being exposed to the story. But I do have
mhm.
to wonder, a first time reader, what they thought Sauron was. Like, is he the
How you
devil?
perceive
Or
it.
like, is he just a man that figured out dark arts? Like, what it
Right.
like,
Well, I do
you know?
think just in the way that we were saying, maybe in the beginning you might have thought Gandalf was just a man who has uncovered the good of wizardry. I think at this point that that's not the case for Gandalf. Of course, that's not the case
Mhm.
for Sauron
Yeah,
either. I don't know
totally.
that anyone would literally be like, this is the devil, but an evil spirit, to say the least,
Yeah,
that is
yeah,
able to
exactly.
embody many different physicalities.
Yeah. So I just thought it was interesting just because in that respect, I can't remove myself from that knowledge. It's like,
Yeah.
how did I think of Sauron? No, we were children when we first saw this. So just bad guy. And that's easy
Yeah.
enough. And maybe that's all you need, truth be told. Just bad guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they've decided. I love the moment about how Prince Imrahil and Éomer, and they all say in their own way, "We're going. Like we're with
Yeah.
Aragorn. He doesn't command us yet, but still, like you're my liege lord. We're brothers.
If you're
We'll
going, we're
follow
all
your
in this
mission."
together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And then I think it's Gandalf who says, we must walk open eyed into that trap with courage, but small hope for ourselves, and they're
Yeah,
all just willing to do it once again. I mean, how many battles, especially the Rohirrim, God, been through so many battles at this
like
point.
3 days. Like,
God, right? It's quite intense. But no, they're all willing to do it. And it's, I think that Gandalf again is that he is the embodiment of hope for them all. He's explaining, look, there's very little hope, but we have to rely once again on evil shall oft mar evil. Sauron is going to see this as a direct call. He's going to assume we have the ring. He's going to take the bait. And even though he knows he can crush us, likely he's going to taunt us out a little bit and focus so intensely on our foolish move that the eye will be turned, and Frodo has this small window of opportunity to save literally all of us.
exactly. It's very, very admirable. And yet that quote of evil you just said, I think it's in that moment, maybe not, where I believe it's Gandalf. He says, "But oft hope is born when all is forlorn." So it's like the
Yes.
antithesis of that statement. And it's true. I mean, it's that idea of eucatastrophe that I mentioned.
Yeah.
And that's what they're banking on. And they're just like, yep. But no, yeah, I think it's very important that, and they do a good job in the movies of explaining this too. But they're going knowing that they're going to die.
Yeah. Well, Gimli has that quote in the movies. What is a small chance of
Certainty of death.
success?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
What are we waiting for?
Yeah.
So, and it's a succinct way to bring it up when it's pages and pages of Gandalf counsel in the books.
Yeah,
But it
exactly.
does a good job. It really made me sad that Mary doesn't go with them. Like,
I
I
agree.
forgot that.
Yeah, me
I wish
too.
he
Me
was.
too. And I think that he had every right to be there. I don't think it was necessary. I get like what maybe narratively, because I think they say, or Gandalf says about like how Pippin will get his chance to
And
do
Mary already
something
had
like
his
Mary did.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I think they both should have been there. I like how they're there in the movies. Um, and
Yeah.
especially because it's mentioned as they're in the houses of healing that Faramir at least, and I think Eowyn will need about like 10 days to recover. But
Yeah.
Merry will be ready tomorrow, just because like he's a little hobbit,
The
he's
little
endured. He'll
resilient
carry like
hobbit.
Frodo. He'll carry his dark wounds, but it will teach him wisdom, and he's back on the horse.
Yeah, smoking his
So I
pipe
agree. I
weed,
wish
and
that he would.
I know, no, I wish he was there too. Although him not being there gives that moment that I alluded to, where Pippin empathizes with Denethor a little bit and is like, "Wow, I wish Mary was with me because all hope is lost, and better we die together."
No, very
But
true.
yeah, I mean, he was missed. I like that he's there in the movies. I'm glad they made that choice. And then before they actually get to the Black Gate, there's a couple things we might want to talk about. But one moment that really stood out to me is, again, the theme of pity comes back up, but they have less than 10,000. I think like
6,000, I think.
7,000, 6,000, maybe. All of like total going to the gates of Mordor, and there's a moment where it's clear that some of the men are completely overcome with hopelessness and terror and fear, and Mordor has been, just like a scary story in their childhood and youth, and not a reality. And Aragorn can tell that some of them are just feeling this hopelessness, and he gives them this kind of out. And he's like, go. You don't need to come with us, but keep your honor. Don't run. If
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
leave, go do some
Come on.
good. Retake Carandros for us, and
If
hold
you
it to the
can, yeah,
last.
he's like, if you can take it, try. But no,
Yeah,
you're exactly right. And it shows just like the strength of his character and as a king, where he's just like, I'm
yeah,
not gonna shame you. I get it. Like there's no hope. Like you're not
yeah.
wrong.
No,
Like, and you're
and
not
it's
a
great because some
coward.
of them actually are like, they were kind of shamed, or like they saw
They
the power of
stay.
their king and they want to stay. But then those who do leave, it isn't a shameful thing to be afraid of death. And I think that's another huge narrative.
No.
It's not that you're not brave or courageous for not fearing death, even though it's said a couple times in the movies. It's fighting past that and moving forward, and again seeing the greater good of it, that
Yeah, and
that shows the braveness in you.
no, 100%. Yeah, you need the fear to be to be brave. And like you mentioned how he sends them off to give them a task. It's like they know like it's strategic to be sure, but I think it is because there's a quote about like how it's like a task for not for their stature or their station. That sounds too condescending. But it's just the idea of like, look, like there's many ways that you can help. And yeah, exactly. Like some I don't know. It didn't shame them. It gave them an opportunity to just be like, look, like do something else that you can do.
Purposeful.
Do what you
Mhm.
can. Like not everyone can do everything. You just have to attend to your own little tasks.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. No,
and
I
then like
really
it
like
goes
that
to what
moment.
you said earlier, just like how they're all parts of the small bits make the whole. And
Yeah, exactly.
you can't all be Aragorn.
Exactly. As much as we might all want to, we can't all be Aragorn.
Yeah.
But no, I like that. And then, I mean, unless there's anything else you had, I think the next point is they get
No,
to the Black
not at
Gate and
all.
they're just kind of awkwardly waiting there. They're like,
Yeah, yeah,
is anyone going
yeah.
to come out?
Pits and
Um,
whatnot.
but the mouth of Sauron, and it's so disgusting once again to me that the mouth of Sauron is only in the extended versions. I mean, the
Agreed.
CGI effort that went into that, just make the movie 5 minutes longer. Come on. But I
Yeah,
know they had to
yeah.
do a lot
It's
of
one of the
cuts for
more egregious
theatrical.
ones, though. Like Saruman is, I think, in my mind, anyways, by far
One
the
of the
number one.
worst.
Yeah, the worst one that they should not have cut.
Yeah.
Especially just for Christopher Lee. It's like, come on, this man is a legend.
It's his moment. And there
Yeah,
that's
it's just
that's a
insulting.
thread that it's never fully solved in the movies. Like you would be like, where is Saruman? Or is he just still up in
No,
his tower?
exactly.
It drives me nuts that they removed that from theatrical. But
Yeah,
yeah, to your
but
point, the
this is
worst
the
one.
I think that this is the second one, where it's just
Mhm.
this plot wise, this should be there. Um,
Yes.
because you get the tokens of Frodo and Sam,
And
which
so
is
there's
very
so
sad
many
here. It's
moments.
extremely sad.
And it's like that in the movies too. I mean,
Mhm.
when he holds up the mithril
Frodo.
coat and Mary and Pippa are like, Frodo, no, and Gandalf, silence,
Yeah,
silence.
he
But you
and
can
you see
see he's
again once
so
more. You got his
destroyed.
tears in his eyes,
Yeah,
and then the mouth of Sauron's like chastising Gandalf. It's like, and he
yeah,
suffered so much at
Greybeard.
the hands of his host, and like
Who knew
it
one
very
so little
creepy.
could handle so much pain?
Yeah,
It's
indeed.
horrible. Although, I really do think that this is a rare place where I think the movies did a way better job of showing this creepy ass guy, like the
Mm.
mouth of Sauron and that crazy mouth he has that
Yeah,
he
it's like
literally
it's big.
is.
Like
Yeah, it's not described like that in the books at all. He's
no, no, no.
just
He's just a
an
human.
evil guy, yeah, on a black horse. But God, that visual in the movies is so well done.
Yeah, you don't see his eyes from his helm. Like he's described in the books as having like some tall helm, but it's not. You get the impression that like he's probably a man that's like way past his like almost like Bilbo, like should probably be dead.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's much the impression is much creepier in the films. I don't know if I think I agree with you. I like the exchange or the exchange in the no, I don't know. Gandalf has once more. It's always Gandalf. Their encounter is really great at the end when Gandalf reveals himself to be Gandalf the White, and he's just like
In the
his
books.
wrath. Yeah, in the books, his wrath
Yeah.
just comes out,
Yeah.
and he's more of like, I'm not like treat with. Yeah, it's the same line. Like they didn't come to treat Sauron like faithless and accursed. He's like, and not one of his slaves, and he just goes off.
Yeah.
Um,
But and
but
it's that funny because everyone thinks Gandalf is going to cede to these
except
terms
yeah,
because the mouth of Sauron has these ridiculous terms like, you know, we have essentially taken over everything and we'll give you the halfling back. And that's when Gandalf says this moment like we didn't come to treat with Sauron, much less one of his slaves. And like, how do we even know you have him? You know,
yeah,
it's there's
exactly.
not really any proof. You have
Because
his coat.
it's like you brought up with the Nazgul when the Witch King hesitated. There's a moment where the mouth of Sauron, like Gandalf catches
Mhm.
it. It's like half of a second of like,
And he's like,
um,
we don't have to tell you anything. Like, you're not in a
yeah,
position to
exactly. Because
ask
he's
me
like, why
that.
didn't you bring the prisoner here?
Yeah. Yeah. And that moment, you're right. And Gandalf picks up on that moment in the mouth of
Yeah,
Sauron's
okay,
eyes or disposition. And then he
moment it
recovers,
is.
but too late. Gandalf sees all.
Yeah, but I do one thing I certainly appreciate more in the movies is when Aragorn beheads him.
I
And I get
have
why
that note
not in the
too.
books. Yeah, I know. I get why, because it's like, oh, maybe that's not kingly or honorable. Like he's an emissary. It's just you're
Yeah.
parlaying.
Don't
Nah,
care.
no,
Get
don't.
rid
I
of
forget
him.
honor. Forget, there's plenty of time for that.
Yeah.
Uh, he's like,
And
because
then, and
Aragorn
he's,
has the better moment. Where he's like, I don't believe it. Like, I will
I
not.
will not believe it. Oh,
Yeah,
I love movie Aragorn so much. Like,
me
again,
too.
such a different character. And I love book Aragorn is great, but movie Aragorn is
The arc is
I'm
more satisfying.
obsessed. Yeah, I just
I
love
think
him. I
it's more
love how
satisfying
Viggo
than things.
Mortensen plays it. I just love him, and he's got so much passion. And yes, behead that little shit. Such a good moment. I
This
do
doesn't
not
say
believe it. I
anything, just
will
drives
not.
up. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's so good. And so I wish some like because as much as I love Gandalf, I've fangirled over him, but I think that moment belonged to Aragorn. He's
totally.
king. He's the one that's challenging Sauron. Gandalf has always won the day. We get it. You're Gandalf the White. Um, but
Aragorn will
but I mean,
not
they have a
stand for
moment.
this.
Sorry.
I just said Aragorn will not stand for this.
No, there's a moment where they have like a contest of wills. um how the mouth of Sauron
Aragorn and
he
the
doesn't
mouth.
say anything. Yeah, exactly. And he's just like, and then that the mouth is the one who recoils, like he's been like physically assailed. He's like,
Yeah, can't handle it.
um,
Can't handle my
yeah.
man Aragorn. It's really sad also that along with that, I cannot believe it, I will not moment from Aragorn. There's no speech because obviously it's a pale comparison to Theoden's epic speech, but I love, love, love Aragorn's speech in the movies. There may be a day
Agreed.
when the strength of men fails, but it is not this day. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just really nice. And I'm
And
sad that he didn't get that moment in the books.
no, I totally agree. So props to Peter Jackson and his team, obviously, because that's like usually in one of the fantastic moments, which is the entire running time of the movies, there's quotes, changes to quotes, something that's taken directly from the source material. But that one is entirely, at least perhaps it comes later in the chapters that I'm in the book and I'm forgetting. But that
I
seems
don't
to
think
be
so.
their own making. Because really, and it
Uniquely.
also shows the kind of king that Aragorn will be, because he's like sons of Rohan and Gondor, like my brothers. Like
Yeah.
we're the same here. Like we're all equal in the eyes of this foe. So
Uniting the lands and also understanding that they're not an infallible race. Like these are, yeah, there could be a
exactly.
moment where we all come to an end, but right now we're here and it's not this day. The strength of us is not going to fail. We are going to do this all. And then of course for Frodo, and they just start running and the
It's
hobbits
amazing.
running
Yeah.
after
And
him.
they
And
go first. So they're the ones that chase Aragorn first, before the armies move.
yeah,
Yeah, it's powerful. And then Legolas and Gimli, I never thought I'd die fighting side by side with an elf.
how
You get
about
a lot of
side by
great
side
character
with a
moments.
friend? Oh
Yeah.
my God. I
It's
just
yeah.
love it. It's so great. But in the books, and maybe this is by virtue of by the end of this part, before we go back to Sam and Frodo, you don't really know what's going to happen. And I think Tolkien is
Mhm.
really trying to create this air of hopelessness because it's way less hopeful, even less hopeful than Pelennor. Like maybe that's why Tolkien doesn't have these moments, because there's no, for Frodo, there's never any of this. There's literally, it seems like Pippin is dead at the end of this
Yeah,
chapter.
yeah, exactly. That's because he gets a killing
Crushed.
blow on a troll, and then it seems like it falls on him. At least that was my
Yeah.
interpretation. Um,
Yes, that's it. Exactly. I think he sees the troll coming for Aemir, or for, I think it's Aemir, but for
Imrahil,
someone.
I believe, or yeah, one of
Oh, it
them.
might be Imrahil, yeah. And he, like you said, he delivers that death blow, and then the troll kind of comes down and crushes him, and he's like, and then I'm like, there's immense pain and blackness, and I'm fading. But then of course he thinks he hears the eagles are coming, the eagles are coming, and for one moment more his thought is still there, and then he's like, no, that's Bilbo's
Yeah,
tail, that's not mine, and
yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
saw no more, and then just end. And so I haven't wanted to pick up the rest of it because I wanted this to be fresh in our minds. And so that's
Yes,
just where I've been leaving the book right now. And I feel sick. Like I know Pippin's not dead, but my God, in the books, you would totally believe, like, oh my
yeah,
God,
that
did
he's
they
dead
fail?
because the
Yeah.
entire time, and like maybe, and I was not around at that time, but it seems like we've become a little more cynical in later days, and our stories are often like need to be gritty and realistic. But even so, I feel like a reader at the time would be like, one of these hobbits has to die. I'm glad that they don't. I think it's better that they don't. Um, it's another thing that I have, another gripe I have with George R. R. Martin, where it's just like, like the heroes are just likely to die. Is it's like, yeah, fair enough, but like that's not why. You read these stories. That's not why. It's like, oh
You're
right,
gonna
I need
piss
a
off the
reminder that actually, like, yeah, everything can really go bad. Oops, I forgot. Um, but
yeah,
yeah, you really get the impression that Pippin is a goner, but he gets his moment.
for sure. I see what you're saying too, because that does seem to be and I think that goes back, and like I don't want to piss off the George R. R. Martin fans because I love Game of Thrones,
Yeah,
except for
me
that last
too. But I
season
just don't
of the
think there's a
TV show.
comparison.
No,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think it does just kind of go back to that like salacious, like I'm gonna do something no one's ever done. I'm gonna kill my main character. Like, okay, fine. But you can also have a story where that doesn't necessarily happen and it can be just as impactful. And we've almost gone in such a crazy direction, and this is just my perspective, but recently with the shock and awe of the main character dying, that it would almost be more shocking to read a recent book where that didn't happen,
No, I
where it was
agreed. I
set up
agree.
and everyone
Yeah,
still
and I
somehow
don't know if it's a
survived.
reflection of the times or whatnot, but it's just we're just a little more cynical, it seems, because
Yeah.
I believe there's an interview on YouTube with George R. R. Martin, and he's obviously I believe he's a big fan of the Lord of the Rings, but he has his gripes, and the one that he mentions in this interview is the fact that he thought that Gandalf should stay dead. And it's like, look, I get that. I can understand maybe where you're coming from, but in my mind, it's like you obviously like maybe I have no right to say this, but you clearly don't understand the story. Like, if you don't see the importance of Gandalf coming back, like you've missed so many of the themes that are trying to be conveyed. That it's like that's
I
not the
agree with you.
story at all that's being broached. Like, for like, it isn't even in the context of the world that Tolkien created. It's like how that is your impression. I don't know.
Yeah, didn't know he said that, but I agree. I think you've missed not only a
Just the
lot of the
mark.
story, but like a lot of the character that is Gandalf and the
Yeah.
purpose of that death, and the fact that I think there's a message there in how death can lead to a rebirth, and not in
Mhm.
the literal sense that we know, where someone literally comes back to the earth, which is what happens with Gandalf, yes, but it's the embodiment of that. And the fact that he comes back as Saruman was meant to be. This is a
Mhm.
character, this is a being that is supposed to be on the earth to fulfill this mission. And because Saruman was not doing it, Gandalf comes and fulfills that role. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, as
I
in
don't,
like an inspirer, because it's in the appendices. Maybe it's never referenced in the book, um, but Gandalf has a ring of power,
yes,
and
you're right. It's never referenced in the book.
and it's the ring that inspires people.
Yeah.
Like that's what he does. Like he doesn't like he aside from his force throw of Denethor's sword and his like white light, he never kills anyone. He's
Yeah.
only ever there just counseling and being like, maybe you should do this.
Being the guiding light of
So it's
hope.
just like, yeah, it's like physically, it's like, who knows? Like maybe I'm sure there's someone out there who's made the idea that Gandalf is never physically there. Like maybe he didn't resurrect. Like I think for sure he did in the body, but you could
Right.
read it if you really wanted to. You could read it as like no, like because that every effect that Gandalf had, like few of them are physical. Like he
He's
grabs
like a
Faramir.
spirit
I'm
guide.
not making that case. I'm just saying that like
Yeah. No, I see what
just
you're saying. There could be a case like
like you were saying,
it could be an interesting dialogue of, oh, is he there? Is he not? I agree with you. Like, I think he's obviously there in physical
yeah,
form. But it is interesting. You're right. He is a spirit guide, essentially. He's a guiding
Mhm.
light. And he counsels, but he doesn't necessarily take action as Gandalf the White. Obviously, as Gandalf
Yeah,
the Grey, he does take action. He saves them all from the Balrog, and then he comes back as the supreme counselor and the inspiration of hope, the inspirer
yeah,
of hope.
exactly. Yeah, well, yeah, both work. Yeah, and so it's a hopeless end, and it's going to get darker as we go into Mordor. One last thing I want to say, just it's just going back a bit. It's not. I never made the connection, and I don't know why. I clearly I'm an idiot. But when the Mouth of Sauron has the tokens, it's like it's dwarven male and the Elvish cape
Yes.
and the sword of Westerness, like the men. And I
Yeah.
never made that connection that even though it's Sam's sword, that all the people, all the free peoples of Middle Earth, more or less, are with
Mhm.
Frodo, you
Yeah.
know? I
No, you're
never, for
right.
whatever reason, I never drew that connection, but I thought
Well,
that when it
it's
was laid out for me, I was like, oh my God, like that's cool.
that's what I was gonna say. It's spelled out for you in the books. I mean, I wouldn't
Yeah.
have caught that in the movies, and I don't even think there's an attempt to demonstrate it even subtly in the movies because I think maybe he has more, but in the movies, he's like the mouth holds up the mithril coat, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's just the coat.
Um, but you're right. It's so interesting. Like all of the different races of Middle Earth have united against this evil, and they've been guiding and supporting Frodo along the way. I
Mhm.
never picked up on it either. So if you're an idiot,
No,
I am
no.
too. But I
Yeah,
really
yeah,
liked that moment. It is really nice to see the unity of them all. And that's
yeah.
what the fellowship is too.
Yeah, exactly. They're representatives of life, essentially.
Yeah. All races of Middle Earth.
Freedom. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's oh my gosh. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful image. And you're right. It ends on such a dark note. My God, Pippin be okay. I mean, spoiler, I know we know he is, but it's still a moment of utter despair. And like you said, it is just gonna get worse. We're gonna return to Sam and Frodo. Sam mostly trying
Yeah.
to save
The
his
great elf
quote
warrior.
unquote master. I can't wait for these moments.
He's
I
Master
loved
Sam.
that description of those orcs being like, who is this fearsome foe that we're up against? And they're about to find out. So I can't wait to
Exactly.
see Samwise come into his own. And there's a lot that's going to happen there. So we'll get into it next time. I don't know if we'll need to divide it up into two parts. Let's get to reading and see
Yeah,
how many
we'll
notes we
see. I
have.
have a suspicion that we will, but we'll play it by ear.
Well, because I mean, getting
Yeah.
to Mount Doom itself likely is going to be one full podcast. And then of course
Or
there's
the
so much.
coronation, or just the coronation, and then I would say the
Yeah.
scoring of the Shire at least probably deserves its own.
A whole area that's not even in the
Yeah.
movies, but has it's a big plot moment in the books. And it really speaks to how worldly and battle weary, not battle weary, but battle experience the hobbits come back in, that
Yeah,
they're
they
able
come
to
back as
just
lords.
yeah. Anyway, a lot of really cool stuff to get into in the sixth book, the last half of Return of the King. Really looking forward to it. But as with every other take, I think we have barely scratched the surface of what is a massive story. So,
Mhm.
if there's any elements of this first half of Return of the King that you feel like we missed, we're always happy to re-explore it. I think we'll end up revisiting a lot of these topics in future takes because I could talk
Yeah, for
about the Lord of
sure.
the Rings forever, and I know you could too, Sam.
Yeah, agreed.
Great.
No, but so I think this is a good place to end it here. And yeah, and that's for my old gaffer. Can't wait.
Cannot wait. Oh, the old gaffer is Sam
He'll be
does a
avenged.
great call out to that, and he will be avenged, absolutely. All right. Well, we will check in with us soon and we will cover book 6. And until then, I'll talk to you later, Sam.
Bye, Katie.